Hello and welcome to TILE Unplugged, your go-to platform at Staffordshire University for discussions about the evolving world of interactive technologies and a whole lot more. On this episode, we'll be discussing the topic of APA referencing and why it's important in your referencing when you're writing an academic report, essay, so on and so forth. I'm your host, Rowan Walker, and today I am joined by Tim Birch from the Academic Libraries and Skills team. Would you like to give yourself a little bit of an introduction? Tell me who you are, what you do, and sort of like your background.
Okay. Hi, Rowan. My name's Tim, and I'm part of the Academic Skills and Librarian team. So part of my role is to help students with their academic work. So that could be looking at referencing, which we'll talk about today. It could be looking at different academic styles of writing. It could be looking at feedback, which you've got from an assignment, and then we can break that feedback down and improve future grades. Awesome.
Sounds like you do quite a lot in that academic sphere.
Yeah. It's quite broad. So really, we can help students. We're quite accessible. Sometimes we come in and do teaching sessions within the groups. We can also do one-to-ones, which can be done on Teams. Can be done face-to-face on university premises, and sometimes students just like to send us an email for some of the work. We can look at a portion of that work and give them feedback on that.
Awesome. So let's get a little bit into the topic of discussion today, referencing.
Yeah.
I remember when I was doing my dissertation, my reference list was massive and I kept adding different stuff in, and I realised very quickly how important it is. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is referencing very generally?
Okay, so really referencing what it is, when you're writing an assignment, it's important that you acknowledge other sources which aren't yours. If you don't do that, you go into the murky depths, which could be potentially plagiarism. So it's important that any work which isn't yours, you credit that to the right person. So that's where referencing comes in. It also allows people who are looking at your work, they might want to follow up and say, oh, that's quite an interesting piece that you're talking about there. They might want to go and look at an article or a book. So if you've referenced that correctly, they can do that quite easily.
Awesome. So how is the referencing then broken down? What do we need to do to referencing?
So sometimes students come to me and say, right, Tim, done really well in my assignment, but I've been marked down in my referencing. So my first question always to students is, what, if any, tools did you use to help you with your referencing? And we get certain answers like, oh, I used an internet tool. So that's your reason why, because there's so many different types of referencing. So if we're looking at APA, Staffordshire University has own version of APA. So what students should all use is a program called Cite Them Right Online. Easy access through the library homepage. That is Staff's University APA referencing. Anything else which is used as an online tool is very generic and it is open to mistakes. So Cite Them Right Online is the go-to one for all students.
Definitely. I remember using that as a student myself. And it's quite relatively straightforward to do because it would not give you an example, but like tell you what areas you need to then write what information in.
Yeah. I always say to students, it's like following the recipe. So they give you different steps of how you do it, breaks it down in nice manageable chunks, follow those steps and you can't go wrong.
Awesome. So what is, I know it's a very broad question to ask, but then what is the APA? What does that mean?
Okay. So APA referencing is it's a type of referencing which tends to be used across different schools in university. So, for example, psychology would use it, sport would use it. So it's just a different way of referencing your work. It's one of 3 or 4 which we use at the university. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting to know. Let's talk about sort of the referencing style and go a little bit more into that then.
So really, to break it down, in its most simplistic terms, there's two different types of referencing. So all you will use is in-text citation. So that's when you're actually referencing something within your text.
Yeah.
And then your reference list. So citations are in the main body of your assignment. So it's usually the author's name followed by the date, so the source which you've used. Anything which you do in in-text citations will count towards your word count. Okay, so it's important that you do count that in your word count. At the end of your assignment, you'll produce a reference list. Okay, so that's all the sites which you've sourced in your main body of your assignment. So you'd reference those in a list. That's alphabetical from author, from A all the way down. And that does not count towards your word count. So it's only your in-text citations.
Okay, so that can be as long as I want it to be.
Your reference list, yeah.
Okay.
What I always say to students is use a broad range of sources. So just don't use, for example, ebooks. So look at your databases, your journals. There's a whole lot of different sources out there, and cite them right. Online does everything from social media to government papers. So don't worry if you're taking something which is quite left field. As long as it's a good academic sound source, cite them right online. Will tell you how to reference them.
I was going to say, maybe not an academic sound source, but I know it does YouTube videos. So when I was doing my papers in the film background, there's a lot of like analytics, which is very personalized between the individuals. But, you know, being able to then catalog that on site them right was relatively easy and straightforward to do. So I can vouch. I think it's pretty good.
Good. And I haven't paid you to say that, have I?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Always good. Always good to know. Okay, so shall we have a look at in-text citations?
Yes, let's do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So on here I've got a slide which gives you an example of 3 different types of in-text citations. So the first one you can see at the top there, that's an example of a direct quote, okay? So we can see there's double quotation marks at the start of psychology, and it finishes at the word earlier. So you can see how that is set up, and because it's a direct quote, we have a page number in it. So everything is in brackets with APA if you're using a direct quote. So you can see the author and the word et al. This et al is used if there's 3 or more authors. Okay, so you would use that then. So if it's 2, you'd use the two surnames. One caution about doing direct quotes, as we said earlier, it does count towards your word count. So I would stay clear of long quotes, more than 2 lines, because if you paraphrase, it shows that you're critically thinking about your work. If you're putting a direct quote in, you're not really showing your skills there. So I'd say kind of stay clear of direct quotes if you can. Paraphrase is the key. That's where you get those higher marks.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. It really helps push across that you understand the material as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, anybody can lift a quote from a source and put it down.
Yeah.
So that's the first example. So that's a direct quote. Might use that quite often. And the second example is a narrative citation. Okay. So what you can see here from the first one is the difference is that's incorporated into the writing. Okay. In that case, all that's in brackets is the year of publication. Okay. So that's the difference there. And the last example is you can see from that the difference is the author and the year is in brackets. Okay. So the reason for that is because it comes at the end of the sentence. Okay. So it's not inclusive in the flow of the words.
Okay. I do have a question. So if we're talking about a certain topic that's outlined in page 98, but I'm not directly referencing, do I need to put my page number in, or can it just be the author's name and the year?
No. If it's direct quote, put the page number in. If it's just a general, no, you're fine not to.
Okay, that's great to know.
Yeah. So that's in-text citations. that's all it is. There's 3 different ways in which you can do an in-text citation. So that's it. So
seems relatively straightforward.
It is, if you break it down like that. Yeah. Okay. And as I say, if any students have any issues with that, cite them right online. It's good. First port of call, or come and ask us.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing then in what you've just referenced is really think about critical thinking and what you're pulling away from the text.
Exactly. And that's how you get those higher marks, is with the critical thinking.
Yeah. And that's what we're all striving for at the end of
it. It is indeed. So the second part of referencing, we talk with the referencing list. So again, that comes at the end of your assignment. So again, let's break it down into wee manageable chunks. There's 4 parts to a reference list. That's all there is, 4 parts. Okay. So it's the who. Okay. So that's the who is always the author. Okay. You've got the when. So that's the dates of when it was published. You've got the what, which is the title. Okay. So what's the work called? Is it the name of the book, etc.? And then the source. Where can I find that if I wanted to have a look at that source? So that's the 4 elements of a reference list. So that's all you need. Who, when, what, where. It's the easy way to remember. Okay. So that's the umbrella, kind of looking at what it is. So let's look at the nut and bolts of that. So your who, so that is your authors, okay, and it's always done by surname, okay, and then first name's always an initial. So you can see from this example, which we've got here, an APA, surname's always followed by a comma,
yeah,
and then the initial of that author, okay. If there's more than one author, we use a comma between each name, as you can see, and we use an ampersand before the final author's name. Okay. As I said, you can provide surnames and initials up to and including 20 on a reference list. Okay, so that's the important thing, 20 on a reference list.
Okay.
So that's your who.
That's my who. Seems relatively straightforward. I do have a question, actually, and this came up in my undergrad, and I think I know the answer already, but if we've got a surname or a name in general from a different part of the world where they use their surname first on a book, so say like Japanese culture, they use surname, then their first name as not their surname, but it's just flipped around. Is there anything we need to do, or can it still remain as the surname with the initial without your lecturer thinking that's wrong?
No, so just keep it with the surname.
Keep it with the surname.
Yeah, keep it with the surname first.
As long as we know that is the order that's in. Okay, great.
That's fine. So is that it about who?
That was it.
Good. So the next one we want to look at is, next stage is when. Okay. So as you can see from the slide we've got there, it's the date. Okay. So all it is date in brackets. As easy as that. Sometimes you might come across a source of material which has no date. So what you would put in brackets then is ND, no date.
ND, no date.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about if you accessed an internet archive of something? Would that then be, if it doesn't have a publication date, would that still remain ED? Or if it was something that is being updated, so say like a news article or something, or a journal, where I've seen it before, they create the initial post and then they update it every year, 2 years. Would we then use the new date they've updated that original one from, or will we use the original one depending on what's...
So it depends. If you would use whatever source you're retrieving at that time. So if it was a new date on that, always use the new date. And sometimes when you're in different types of referencing, if you access a website, you have to put the access date on. But yeah, so always go with the date that you've accessed it on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yep, so that's it. When, brackets, put the date in. So the next one is what. Okay, so I've put another slide up here for what. So you can see There's the main things in this slide. There's two different types of titles. So there's work that stands out alone, okay? So that could be the title of the book, a journal, magazine, newspaper, anything like that. Then there's work that is part of the greater whole. So that might be a chapter of a book, an article in a journal, or a magazine or newspaper, okay? So the title of the work that stands out alone is always put in italics, okay? And capitalise it in sentence case. So as you can see from there, we've got in italics Royal College of Psychiatrists. We've got the name in italics, okay? So that's the main thing with the what to remember.
Make sure it's in italics.
Yes. Yeah. And your final part of a reference list is where. Okay. So that is where it is published. So I put another slide up there. So sometimes when you're online, you will see what's called a DOI. Okay. Yeah. Some sites don't have a DOI. If that's the case, just use the URL then. Okay. So that will keep you good. As you can see the difference there in the slide. We've got DOI in the first one, and we've got a URL in the second one. So you do not punctuate a DOI or URL, because if I wanted to go and have, that's quite an interesting piece there, I'll go and check that myself. If you punctuate that, it will break the link. So it's important that you don't put any punctuation on there.
Yeah, I can see that 404 and with like a full stop at the
end. Yeah, you might inadvertently put that in, and so that's the main parts to a reference list.
Okay, what about for the where? Would I need to say for a book? Would there be any information that I need to include on that where for the book, or can it just purely be the title and the author and then the date?
The where or the when?
The where.
The where. Okay, so if it's a book, you would put so it's a book, you would put where it was published, and the publisher, and that's the same for an ebook as well as a physical book.
Oh, so both then?
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy enough to find, because most of the time those will just be located around the cover, or if not, you can find that information online as well, as long as you are sure it is where it's published. Okay, yeah. Well, that seems relatively easy. So we need the who, is the author. I do have another question, actually.
Go on, you're testing me today, Rowan.
If we have an organisation that ends up publishing the book, do we then find the authors, or can we use the publishers as the authors? So if I was using a Film Society book, it's created by the Film Association of Cinematographers, but then it's not directly referenced in the book who wrote what, just this category of people. Can I then is it better if I then hunt down who wrote this bit, or can I just put the organisation?
Put the organisation down. Yeah, that's fine, because you could be going down a rabbit hole trying to find that. So yeah, just so organisation.
Just the organisation. And then we move to the when. So we're looking at the year.
Yeah.
And if you're taking the most recent version of what you have. So if the book's published in 2014, we put 2014. Yeah. If it's an online resource that has been updated recently and you've accessed it with that recent one in mind, take that date then. Yeah. Then we go to the what. So what is the publication called? So the title of the journal or the article or the source or the book. And then finally the where. So if it's an online source, we're taking the DOI or the URL. And finally, if it's a book, we're saying publishers, and is it the place?
Yes, it is the place. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got it. You've got it.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's just taken me back 2 years ago, writing my dissertation. Oh, terrifying. Is there anything that you think is important to mention?
Yeah, there's a few things. A lot of students do get a bit stressed about referencing, but that's part of why we're here. We do specific workshops, which is our referencing, and we do them throughout the year. So you can, I'll put up the link for that for the workshops. We also do one-to-one sessions, which are just for referencing. Okay, so that's Louise does that really good, and she'll just concentrate on referencing. Whereas we all do referencing, but we do, as we talked about earlier at the start, critical writing, academic writing, feedback, reflection, all the skills which students need to get those higher grades, which is what we're looking for.
Definitely. Would you say that students do struggle with it in general, or is it very much sort of, it's a daunting task, but then once they stick their teeth in it?
Yeah, I think students do tend to get a bit stressed about that, but if they use Cite and Write Online, they'll be fine. And the message is to get across really is that is your go-to place. Don't be using any generic tools on the internet, because you will come unstuck. Okay,
great. Well, I think that's it from my side of things. Is there anything else you want to say?
No. As I say, if there's any questions, we'll put up how you can book an appointment with us as an academic skills team, and feel free to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's a nice refresher as well, because I'm doing some writing at the moment, so having that reference in, it's just like, gets it back in the system, you know? But yes, thanks very much. I will add all of the information down into the description box so people can access. It's the Library and Academic Skills team. You can book an appointment on there. Yeah. There's librarians per school. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, there is. So we all specialise in certain schools, but when you go to have a look, if one of us is allocated to your school and there's no appointments, don't worry. All the people from the team can pick that up.
Okay, that's great. And then we can do one-on-ones or workshops with yourselves over in the libraries team.
Yeah, we can do that.
So, there is no excuse now. Hopefully, fingers crossed, with that assistance from everything, students will be fine doing their academic writing, I hope.
Yeah. And if you are struggling, you know how to get us now.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you found it educational and you can now take that into your practices for your own academic writing. We have a whole series of different podcasts you can listen to, so feel free to tune into those. We've had Jodie in from the libraries team as well, and she come on to do some talking as well, and that was really interesting as well. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get more of the libraries to sit down with us as well, and have more topics, but feel free to head down to the links in the description. I'll post some different bits and bobs down there about referencing themselves and more about the libraries team. And yeah, thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.